Embracing my younger self. That's what I'd do if time travel were possible. Not to alter the events, for I now recognize their inevitability, but to whisper reassurances of future happiness to that frightened child. Such foresight eluded me then. I was merely an 8-year-old girl, unable to comprehend the magnitude of losing her innocence so abruptly. I am Grace Sullivan, now in my 75th year, and retrospection reveals a journey marked by challenges that molded my current identity. While many contemporaries harbor similar difficult histories, few choose to vocalize them. I share mine because silence was my only option for far too long. The year 1949 marked my arrival in a modest West Virginia mining community. Financial hardship defined our existence. My father, John Sullivan, descended daily into the coal mines, while my mother, Mary, supplemented our income by laundering and repairing garments for the town's affluent residents. Our resources were limited, yet our familial bonds remained strong. My youthful perspective couldn't grasp our economic struggles. To my childish understanding, material lack seemed inconsequential compared to the joy of playing alongside my siblings or feeling grass beneath my bare feet. My 8th year brought an unforeseen transformation. I remained oblivious that my existence was about to veer toward experiences no child should endure. I held unwavering faith that my mother would remain my perpetual guardian, that my father would reliably return home displaying his weary but warm smile, and that my childhood would unfold at its natural pace, allowing me to savor each moment. Destiny, however, had crafted an entirely different narrative.
I want to pause for a moment. If you feel the love and are still listening to my story, please subscribe and hit the like button on the Grandparents Memories channel to show your support. Thank you so much.
If I had a choice, my child, I would never do this to you. But it's either this or we starve. Your little brother is young, your father doesn't have steady work, and I can't manage alone anymore. At that moment, I understood there was no escape. I was 8 years old and had to accept that my childhood would end right there. The next morning, my mother dressed me in a dress that once belonged to my older sister. It was worn out with some patches, but it was the best we had. On my feet were my already worn sandals with loose straps. I held a bundle of cloth with a few simple clothes inside. The walk to Mrs. Montgomery's house was silent. My mother held my hand tightly, as if wanting to imprint the touch to never forget. I just looked at the ground, kicking small stones while trying to understand why my life had changed so quickly. When we arrived, my mother knocked on the door. The sound echoed through the large house, and my stomach turned with nervousness. A few seconds later, the door opened, revealing a woman with her hair pulled back, a hard expression and cold eyes. "Ah, finally. I thought you'd change your mind," she said. My mother forced a smile, but I saw her watery eyes. "Here's my daughter, Mrs. Montgomery. Please take good care of her." The woman laughed softly with disdain. "This is work, not adoption. Girl, come in." I felt my mother squeeze my hand one last time before letting go. I looked at her, hoping she would say something to assure me everything would be okay. But she just turned her back and walked away without looking back. The lump in my throat grew, but I swallowed hard and entered. The door closed behind me, and the sound of the latch turning made me shudder. The house was enormous but cold. There was no laughter, no children, just expensive furniture, heavy curtains, and a strong smell of wood polish. Mrs. Montgomery looked me up and down and gestured with her hand. First thing, never look me in the eyes. Second, no laziness. Third, you only eat after everyone else has eaten. I wanted to ask something, wanted to say I was afraid, but the answer came before I could open my mouth. "Girls like you come and go. If you do everything right, maybe I won't need to send you away soon. Now go to the kitchen. You start now." My chest tightened. I wanted to run, wanted to cry, wanted my mother. But I was just a child, and nobody asked what children like me wanted. I didn't know it then, but that was just the first day of a long journey of pain, loneliness, and resilience. The smell of Montgomery Manor was different from my home. Inside, everything had a strong aroma of wood polish, a clean smell, but not the kind of cleanliness that brings comfort. It was a cold, impersonal cleanliness, as if someone scrubbed the surfaces not out of want but out of obligation. The floor shone so brightly I could see my own reflection, a small, frightened reflection with bare feet after being told to remove my sandals at the entrance. The first room I saw was the enormous living room, with sofas I knew I could never sit on, hand-embroidered rugs, and a crystal chandelier hanging from the ceiling. But despite the luxury, the environment had no human warmth. It was a large house, but without laughter, without children running, without music. My mind was still on the last image of my mother walking away. I expected her to turn around, to look back at least once, but she didn't. Perhaps because if she looked, she wouldn't have the strength to keep walking. Perhaps because she knew if she saw me crying, she would come back for me. But the world of the poor didn't afford that luxury. Tears didn't pay bills. Mrs. Montgomery observed me as if evaluating an object. "Do you already know how to wash clothes?" I nodded affirmatively. "Do you know how to iron too?" I remained silent for a few seconds. My mother never let me near the iron. She said it was dangerous. "No, ma'am." She frowned as if that were a personal offense. "Great, another thing to learn. Come with me." She walked and I followed behind. She took me through the corridors, showing me every corner of the house. It wasn't a tour, it was a warning. "Here you cannot enter. There, you only enter to clean and leave quickly. Never touch these objects." Then we stopped in front of a narrow door at the back of the house. "This will be your room," she said. She pushed the door, revealing a small space without windows. There was a wooden bed with a thin mattress, a pillow yellowed by time, and a rough blanket folded in the corner. Next to it, a small wardrobe with only one door. "You'll get food after everyone has eaten. Bath only after 9 at night. I don't want to waste water. And no noise. If you hear footsteps in the corridor, stay quiet. If you need something, think twice before bothering me." She didn't wait for a response. She simply closed the door and left me there alone. The silence of that little room was different from the silence of my room at home. In my room, the silence was broken by the sound of crickets outside, by the wind passing through the cracks in the boards, by the muffled laughter of my siblings in the room next door. Here, no. The silence was crushing, heavy. I sat on the edge of the hard bed and hugged my knees. For the first time since leaving home, I cried. But I cried in silence. I woke up to a shout. "Get up, girl. The sun is already up." I sat up on the bed with a start, not knowing where I was. My body ached from a night poorly slept on the thin mattress, and my eyes still stung from the tears of the night before. But I had no time to recover. When I left the little room, the house was already in motion. The masters were waking up, and I needed to hurry. "You start in the kitchen. Wash all the breakfast dishes, and quickly, because afterward there's laundry to wash." The kitchen was full of dirty dishes, cups and cutlery. I took the dishcloth and began to scrub. The water was cold and my hands began to hurt, but I didn't complain. The hours passed and the work seemed endless. After the dishes came the floors to scrub, the furniture to dust, the clothes to beat on the washboard. It never stopped. There was never a moment of rest. The hardest part was understanding that I was no longer a normal person in that house. I was invisible. No one addressed me except to give orders. If I was in a room and one of the masters entered, I should leave immediately. I heard laughter, conversations, and the tinkling of fine china and crystal stemware in the dining room, but I never participated in any of it. And then, when it was already past 3 in the afternoon, my stomach growled loudly. I remembered the last thing Mrs. Montgomery had said, "Food only after everyone has eaten." I went to the kitchen and waited. The older servant, a woman of about 40 named Ruth Johnson, looked at me with pity and pointed to a plate in the corner of the table. It was a deep plate with leftovers of rice, a piece of cold meat, and almost dry beans at the bottom. "Eat quickly before they tell me to throw it away," she said. I held the spoon with trembling hands and swallowed quickly. It had no taste, but it was food. My body needed it. Ruth sighed and said softly, "You're too young to be here." But there was nothing more to be done. After the late lunch, I returned to work. The afternoon fell, and when the clock struck 9, I could no longer feel my legs. I went to my little room, closed the door, and lay down. The thin mattress no longer seemed so uncomfortable. My eyes burned, and every muscle in my body screamed with pain. That night, I fell asleep before I could even think about my mother. And so began my new life. I woke up the next day with pain all over my body. My back seemed to be burning. The muscles in my legs throbbed, and my hands were so rough they scratched my own face when I tried to rub my eyes. My first instinct was to call my mother. I always did that when I woke up with some discomfort, but when I opened my eyes and saw the cold, dark walls of that little room, I remembered she was no longer there. The life I knew had been left behind. I got up with difficulty and opened the door slowly, feeling the strong smell of fresh coffee coming from the kitchen. The day had barely begun, and I already knew it would be long. Time passed, and my routine at Montgomery Manor became an endless cycle of work, fatigue, and hunger. I woke up before everyone, cleaned, scrubbed, washed, and served. Each task was done in a hurry, with no time to rest. And when hunger tightened, I learned to deceive my stomach. Breakfast was for the masters. The table was filled with warm bread, creamy butter, freshly baked biscuits, and well-sweetened coffee with milk. But none of that was for me. I just looked from afar, swallowing dryly while cleaning the floor and listening to the laughter of the masters talking about their plans for the day. At lunch, when I could finally eat, it was always the leftovers of leftovers, the chicken bones the masters left, the grains of rice that remained at the bottom of the pot, a thin broth that barely had any taste. And it was like this every day. But the worst wasn't the food. The worst was the indifference. The master spoke to me as if I weren't a person. They never asked me how I was, if I was in pain, if I needed anything. I was just another piece inside that house, like the furniture, like the floor cloths, and the loneliness that accompanied me all the time. If I had siblings or other children by my side, perhaps it would be easier. But there, I was the only girl. There was no one with whom to share a look of complicity, a friendly word, a moment of rest. Days passed, and I didn't hear my name being called with affection. No one looked me in the eyes. No one cared if I was okay. Sometimes I tried to make conversation with Ruth, the other servant, but she was always in a hurry, always busy. When she spoke to me, it was in whispers, as if she were afraid the masters would hear. "Girl, keep your questions to yourself. In here, those who ask too many questions end up leaving quickly." I wondered where the girls who left went, but I never asked out loud. Sometimes I looked out the window and saw children, my age, running in the street, playing, laughing, kicking a ball. My chest ached with envy. I wondered if my mother still thought of me, if she missed me, if at some point she would come to get me. The nights were the worst. I lay on that hard bed and hugged my own legs to try to deceive the feeling of emptiness. At first, I cried softly, but after a few weeks, the tears dried up, not because I no longer felt sadness, but because I began to understand that crying would change nothing. One night, the hunger was so great I began to feel dizzy. The master's dinner had been plentiful: roast beef, fluffy rice, stuffing, and well-seasoned beef stew. And I had received a hard piece of bread and a glass of water. My stomach growled so loudly that I feared someone would hear. Then, for the first time, I did something I never imagined I would do. I waited for the house to fall silent, got up slowly, and walked to the kitchen, stepping lightly so the wooden floor wouldn't creak. My heart was beating so hard I felt the blood pulsing in my ears. On the table, I saw a bowl with leftover rice and a piece of bitten meat left aside by the masters. My eyes filled with water. I took a little with trembling hands and stuffed it into my mouth without chewing properly, trying to kill the hunger that devoured me from within. That was when I heard footsteps in the corridor. I froze. Fear took over me, leaving me immobile in the dark. If they caught me stealing food, I knew the punishment would be harsh. I held my breath, expecting the worst, but the footsteps passed straight by, disappearing through the house. I released the air slowly and ran back to my little room, with the taste of fear mixed with stolen food. That night, I learned 2 things. Hunger makes us do things we never imagined, and I couldn't continue living like this. It was the first time I felt within me something I had never felt before, a growing revolt. That life couldn't be all I would have. And without knowing how or when, I decided that one day I would leave that house. I had already been in that house for months, when I realized that no matter how hard I tried, it would never be enough. It didn't matter if I scrubbed the floor until my fingers turned red, if I washed the clothes until my nails broke, if I woke up before the sun to ensure everything was perfect. Humiliation was part of my daily life. Mrs. Montgomery seemed to find a strange pleasure in testing me, in making me feel small. "This plate is dirty. Do you want me to eat amid filth, girl?" The dishes shone, but I never questioned, just washed them again. "Are you stupid or do you do it on purpose? Look at this bedsheet. Do you see this wrinkle? Do you want to sleep in an unmade bed?" I swallowed hard and started over. The words hurt almost as much as the punishments. But the words weren't the worst. I remember the day, as if it happened yesterday. It was a hot afternoon, and I had spent hours in the backyard garden, washing bed sheets in the tub. The sun burned my skin. My arms ached from so much scrubbing, and my legs were trembling from exhaustion. But I didn't complain. I never complain. When I finished, I went to hang the bed sheets on the line. I did it carefully. I had learned that any mistake meant having to redo everything. Without realizing, I let one of the bed sheets fall to the ground. When I saw Mrs. Montgomery's face contort in a mixture of anger and satisfaction, as if she had been waiting for a mistake to have an excuse to punish me, my heart froze. "Girl, come here now." My heart froze. I went to her, my hands sweating cold. "What is this?" She pointed to the dirty sheet on the ground. "The wind, ma'am. I didn't see." "You didn't see. You didn't see. Well, you're going to learn to see." Before I could react, I felt the first slap on my face. My ears rang and my vision became blurry for a few seconds. I wanted to run, to curl up, to disappear from there, but I knew any reaction would only make things worse. "Take this sheet and wash everything again. And no food today to learn." I just nodded, holding back the tears. Tears never helped. I spent the entire afternoon scrubbing that sheet as if my life depended on it. Maybe it did. After that day, punishments became frequent. If I took too long to finish a task, I went without dinner. If I left a glass out of place, I had to clean the entire kitchen again. If a button on the master's clothes was loose, I spent hours sewing pieces that didn't even have a defect.
I want to pause for a moment. If you feel the love and are still listening to my story, please subscribe and hit the like button on the Grandparents Memories channel to show your support. Thank you so much.
And if I dropped something, that was the worst. Once I let a glass fall to the floor. The noise of the glass shattering was like thunder in my ears. Mrs. Montgomery appeared in the kitchen in seconds. "What did you do?" My throat was dry. "It was an accident, ma'am." "An accident? Then you're going to clean this with your hand to learn to be careful." I swallowed the tears and knelt on the floor. With trembling fingers, I began to collect the pieces of glass. My thin skin didn't take long to yield. Soon, a cut opened at the tip of my finger, and blood ran down my hand. Mrs. Montgomery saw but said nothing. She just crossed her arms and waited. I continued. I finished cleaning and washed the wound in silence. That night, lying on the thin mattress, I looked at my cut fingers and promised myself that I would never let this happen again. But I was just a child, and children make mistakes. If the physical punishments were harsh, the humiliations were even worse. Mrs. Montgomery made a point of demeaning me in front of visitors. "This girl is too slow, but at least she serves to scrub floors." Or, "If I don't keep an eye on her, she eats like a starving animal. The poor are all the same." The visitors laughed. Some shook their heads, but no one ever said anything. No one ever questioned. I just lowered my head and pretended not to hear. But I heard, and each word was stored inside me like an invisible weight that I carried wherever I went. There was a day when I thought my body wouldn't take any more. I had gone 2 days without eating properly after committing some silly mistake that I don't even remember anymore. The fatigue was so much that my eyes burned and my knees seemed weak. That was when, in the middle of the kitchen, everything darkened. I felt the floor disappear, and my head spun. I woke up minutes later, fallen on the floor. Ruth, the older servant, was by my side, fanning my face with a cloth. "You fainted, girl." I blinked slowly, trying to focus my vision. "Does the mistress know?" I asked with a weak voice. She sighed and shook her head. "She knows, but she said that when you woke up, you should get back to work." I closed my eyes, feeling a lump in my throat. There was no truce, no mercy. I was just an 8-year-old girl, and the world had already taught me that my pain didn't matter. That night, lying on the thin mattress, my mind hammered a single question. If this is my life now, what will become of me when I grow up? I didn't know yet, but I was about to discover that even in the worst situations, there is a way to escape. Time passed. Weeks turned into months, and I no longer knew what it was like to live without fear. My routine was always the same. Wake up before the sun, work until my bones ached, eat leftovers, and sleep on the thin mattress in my dark little room. I avoided thinking about the future because thinking about the future was too painful. Would my life always be like this? Would I still be there when I grew up, cleaning those same pieces of furniture, hearing those same insults? I didn't want to believe so, but until then, I had no reason to believe it could be different. Until the day I found my first book. It was a stuffy Sunday morning, and Mrs. Montgomery had ordered me to clean the yard. The yard of the house was large, with one part covered in grass and another where the back of the kitchen and the disposal area were located. There, in a corner, was a pile of old boxes, old newspapers, and things the mistress no longer wanted. While sweeping, I saw something different amid the crumpled papers. A rectangular object with a dark cover, somewhat dirty but whole. I picked it up carefully. It was a book. The letters were a bit faded, but I could read the title, Great Expectations, by someone named Charles Dickens. I didn't know who that man was, and much less what the book said, but holding that object in my hands gave me a strange sensation, as if I were touching something forbidden, something powerful. My heart beat faster. I looked around, making sure no one saw me, and quickly hid it under my blouse. That night, lying on my hard bed, I waited until everything was silent, and with trembling hands, I opened the book for the first time. My finger passed slowly over the small letters, trying to decipher them. I knew how to read, but I had never read an entire book before. In my house, before being sent to work, my father used to read passages from the Bible aloud, and my mother taught me the basics with product labels and words in old newspapers. But that was different. Those words pulled me into a new world. A world where I wasn't the poor, invisible girl of that house. It was a world where I could exist without fear. Each sentence I read seemed to take me far from there. The story of that Pip character didn't make much sense at first, but I couldn't stop. I read slowly, pronouncing the words softly, trying to understand each sentence. And the more I read, the more I wanted to continue. For the first time in a long time, I felt there was something that was just mine. Reading that book became my most precious secret. Every night, after an entire day of work and humiliation, I lay in the dark and read a few pages. Sometimes my hands trembled with fatigue, my eyes burned, but I didn't stop. The fear of being discovered made me hide the book under the mattress during the day, and I was right to be afraid. One morning, while sweeping the corridor, I heard heavy footsteps approaching. Before I could react, I felt a strong pull on my arm. It was Mrs. Montgomery. "What were you doing last night, huh?" Her voice was cold, cutting. My heart stopped. Had she discovered? "Nothing, ma'am, just sleeping." She analyzed me with those hard eyes, as if trying to read my mind. Then she squeezed my arm more and whispered, "I hope so, because stupid girls have to work, not waste time with nonsense." I let out a relieved sigh when she released me and walked away. But that day, when I returned to my little room, I was paralyzed to see my bed overturned. My hiding place had been discovered. I knelt and looked under the mattress, desperate, but the book was no longer there. I ran my eyes around the room. My breathing accelerated. Where was it? My chest tightened when I saw a torn piece of paper on the floor. I picked up the piece, and on it was a single word, still legible. Pip. My book had been torn. I stood up, feeling the tears rise. I looked at the closed door, my body trembling with anger and frustration. Someone, probably Mrs. Montgomery or some servant who wanted to please her, had found my only treasure and destroyed it. That night, I lay on the empty mattress and closed my eyes, fighting against crying. But for the first time, the sadness was not greater than the revolt. The next morning, while cleaning the living room, I saw a bookshelf full of books. They had always been there, but I had never paid attention. And then, something inside me lit up. If I had managed to read one book, I could read others. If that world of stories existed, I wanted to know it. That night, I waited for the house to sleep. Then, barefoot, I went to the living room, opened the bookshelf slowly, and slid a book out. I held it with trembling hands and ran back to the little room. When I opened it, I read the title, Charlotte's Web by E.B. White. And there, in the silence of the night, I made a promise to myself. I would learn everything I could, even if it was hidden, even if I was punished. Because somehow I knew that books were my only way out. And so began my secret struggle for knowledge. What I didn't know was that this choice would completely change the course of my life. Montgomery Manor never slept early. After dinner, the master stayed in the living room, listening to the radio or talking about the life I would never have. Visitors came and went. The sound of crystals timbre tinkling, laughter filling the corridors. I heard everything from my little room. I lay waiting for silence, and when finally the house plunged into the darkness of dawn, my struggle began. I took the book hidden under the mattress, and with the weak light of the moon that entered through the crack of the door, I read each word carefully, pronouncing softly, trying to understand what each sentence meant. But learning alone wasn't easy. Some words were strange, difficult, and I had no one to ask. That was when I made my second risky decision. I would find someone who could teach me. The opportunity arose on a stuffy morning when I was sent to the downtown farmer's market to buy vegetables. I carried the old straw bag and followed the dirt path with bare feet, racing dust. The market was one of the few places where I saw the world happening. The colorful stalls, the shouts of the vendors, the smell of fresh fruits and baked bread. It was there that I found Mr. Samuel Cooper. He was an elderly man, owner of a bookstore and newsstand. He was always sitting on a small stool, wearing glasses, reading some newspaper yellowed by time. I had never dared to speak to him, but that day, when I passed by the store and saw the books stacked, my heart beat faster. I stopped for a moment, looking at the open pages. "Do you like books, girl?" His voice caught me by surprise. I raised my head and found his curious eyes. I swallowed hard and nodded affirmatively. He frowned, as if not expecting that response. "And can you read?" "I know a little, but not everything." He analyzed me for a few seconds and then gave a side smile. "Then you need to learn more." I wanted to say yes, that I wanted to learn everything, but fear held me back. What if he told someone? What if Mrs. Montgomery found out? But Mr. Cooper seemed to see my hesitation. He took a newspaper and folded it as if he were going to wrap something. "Here, take this with you. It's wrapped. No one needs to know what's inside. Come back tomorrow and tell me if you manage to read anything." I took the package with trembling hands, nodded, and ran back to the house. That night, I opened the hidden newspaper and tried to read. The paper was different from books, thinner with smaller letters and tight columns. The words were difficult, but some I could understand. Others, I just imagined the meaning. And the next day, when I went to the market again, I stopped in front of Mr. Cooper's store. He looked at me with expectation. And then, I swallowed hard. I understood some words, but not others. He smiled, satisfied. "Great. I'll teach you some things, but only if you promise not to tell anyone." I nodded quickly. And one more thing, girl. If one day they ask you who taught you, say you learned by yourself. I didn't ask why. I just engraved those words in my chest. My routine changed. Every day, I found a way to pass by Mr. Cooper's store. He gave me a new newspaper or a small book, and in the early morning, I read in hiding in the tight little room. I began to understand longer sentences, to recognize difficult words, to form thoughts that I didn't know how to express before. But studying without anyone noticing required care. I hid the papers under the bed, folded inside clothes, even inside old pots that no one used. Still, the fear of being discovered was constant, and one day that fear became reality. It was on a very hot afternoon. Mrs. Montgomery was in a bad mood, complaining about everything, and anything seemed to be a reason to fight. I was in the kitchen, trying to clean a heavy pot when I heard her scream. "What is this?" My blood froze. I ran to the living room and saw Mrs. Montgomery holding an old newspaper. It was one of those I had brought from the market. It must have fallen from under the bed and somehow ended up in the middle of the laundry room. She squeezed the paper in her hand, her face red with anger. "Where did this come from? Are you picking up trash from the street? Don't you have anything to do? Want to read? Poor people like you don't need these things. They need to work." She tore the paper into pieces right in front of me. Each piece falling to the floor was like a part of me being destroyed. I wanted to scream, wanted to cry, but I did nothing. I just lowered my head and murmured, "Sorry, ma'am." My heart was in pieces, but I knew I couldn't let that defeat me. I would continue, even if I had to learn each word just inside my mind. That night, after cleaning the entire floor of the house as punishment, I lay down and took a deep breath. I needed to prove to myself that I could still learn. I took an old piece of paper and a pencil I had found thrown in the kitchen. With a trembling hand, I began to write slowly. "I will get out of here." I read those words several times. At that moment, I didn't know how or when, but I knew it was true. I would live there and never again let anyone destroy what I wanted to be. I had already been in that house for years. Time passed, and gradually I was no longer the frightened girl who arrived there at 8 years old. My body had grown, my hands were calloused, my skin marked by hard work, but inside me there was still something no one managed to destroy, the will to learn and be more than a simple invisible servant. However, that will become my greatest threat. It was a stuffy Sunday morning when everything happened. Mrs. Montgomery was especially irritated, and anything seemed to bother her. The coffee wasn't hot enough. The curtains weren't aligned. The dust that barely existed on the furniture seemed to bother her more than the scorching heat. I already knew what would come. Whenever she was like this, someone would have to pay for her bad mood. This time it was me. I was in the kitchen washing the pots when I heard her voice cut through the air like a knife. "Girl, come here now." My stomach turned. I dropped everything and ran to the living room, drying my hands on the apron. She was standing in front of the bookshelf holding a small notebook. My notebook. "What is this?" Her voice came out icy. I swallowed hard. It was an old notebook that I used to practice writing. I hid it behind the bookshelf, among the books that no one read. I thought no one would find it there, but I was wrong. "I'm sorry, ma'am, I was just writing." Her eyes narrowed. "Writing? You think you were born for this? You think you can be more than a servant? Poor people like you aren't good for anything else."
I want to pause for a moment. If you feel the love and are still listening to my story, please subscribe and hit the like button on the Grandparents Memories channel to show your support. Thank you so much.
My body trembled, not from fear. I was already used to fear, but from the injustice, the anger, the pain of being treated like a disposable object. "I just wanted to learn," I murmured softly. Her reaction was immediate. In a quick gesture, she threw the notebook on the floor and stomped on the pages I had written with so much effort. "Learn for what? Are you going to write love letters to another poor person like you?" Are you going to delude yourself thinking you can be something more? Not in my house. And then came the phrase that would change my life forever. Take your things and get out of here now. My eyes widened. Expelled? Where would I go? My heart raced and my vision became blurry. Terror took over me. Please, ma'am, I have nowhere to go. But she didn't even look at me. That's not my problem anymore. Out. Ruth appeared at the kitchen door and looked at me with pity. She wanted to say something, but just sighed and turned her face. I went up to my little room and took the little I had. A change of clothes, a piece of dry bread, and the pencil I hid in my pocket. My world fit in a small bundle. When I passed through the door, I looked back, hoping my mistress would change her mind, but all I saw was her expression of indifference. And then, for the first time in years, I was free. But freedom without direction was as frightening as prison. I walked without looking back. The strong wind hit my face, my bare feet dusty. I went to where my mother used to live, but found out she had moved with my siblings to look for work elsewhere. There was no way to find her, so I walked. I walked through streets I had only seen from afar before, through the market where vendors shouted, through the square where children played. But I was no longer a child. I didn't belong anywhere. When night fell, I sat on the sidewalk, hugging my own body. The cold wind cut my skin, and fear mixed with fatigue. That's when I felt a hand touch my shoulder. Startled, I found Mr. Cooper, the old bookstore owner. He looked at me for a few seconds without saying anything, but in his eyes was something I hadn't seen in a long time. Understanding. "You were expelled, weren't you?" he asked straightforwardly. I nodded, trying to hold back tears. He sighed and scratched his beard. "I already imagined this would happen. That woman would never let you learn." I swallowed hard. "And now what do I do?" He analyzed me as if making a silent decision. Then finally said, "You can sleep in my store tonight. It's not much, but at least you won't be cold. Tomorrow we'll think about the rest." My eyes filled with tears. "Why are you helping me?" Mr. Cooper gave a half smile. "Because I've seen many girls like you get lost in the world. And because I know you have something no one can take from you, the will to win." That night, I slept on the floor of Cooper's books and newsstand, among piles of old books. It wasn't a soft mattress. It wasn't a warm house. But for the first time, I slept knowing that perhaps there was a future for me. And the next day, when I woke up, I decided I would never again let anyone stop me from learning. After all, I had nothing to lose, and perhaps that was all I needed to start again. The sun rose slowly, spreading golden tones across the sky, and I woke up smelling old newspapers and yellowed paper around me. For the first time in years, there was no one shouting my name to send me to work. Mr. Cooper was already up, sitting on his stool, reading as always. "Did you sleep well?" he asked without taking his eyes off the newspaper. I stretched slowly. The hard floor wasn't comfortable, but still, it had been the best night of my life. "Yes, sir. Thank you." He folded the newspaper, looked at me and sighed. "Now tell me, girl, what are you going to do with your life?" This question caught me by surprise. For years, I had no choice. My life was decided by others. Now, for the first time, I had to decide what I wanted for myself. "I want to learn." My voice came out low but firm. "I want to study. I want to know more about the world." He smiled as if he already knew my answer. "Then you need to survive first." And that's how my struggle to become someone in the world began. Freedom had a high price. I was no longer under Mrs. Montgomery's domain, but now I had to fend for myself. Mr. Cooper arranged a place for me to work at a nearby bakery. The owner, a man named Mr. George Miller, let me wash dishes and sweep the floor in exchange for food and a few coins. It wasn't easy. Work at the bakery started before dawn, and I spent the entire day with my hands soaked in cold water, scrubbing dishes non-stop. The smell of fresh bread tortured me, but at the end of the day, I earned a piece of stale bread and a glass of milk. With the little money I managed to save, I bought a new notebook and a pencil. At night, after work, I returned to Mr. Cooper's store and studied by the faint light of the street lamp. I read newspapers, copied words, practiced my handwriting. I had no time to play, no time to rest. But that didn't matter to me. I had a purpose. Being a girl alone on the street wasn't easy. Some people looked at me with pity, others with contempt. "Why does this girl sit there writing?" I heard a woman whisper at the market. "Studying is useless if you were born to be a servant," said a man, laughing. I pretended not to hear, but the words hurt. The worst was when some rich women, similar to Mrs. Montgomery, passed by the store and stared at me with the same look of superiority. "Cooper, why is this dirty girl here? Aren't you afraid she'll steal your newspapers?" He smiled out of the corner of his mouth and replied, "Don't worry, ma'am. She's only stealing knowledge." And I lowered my head, holding the pencil more firmly. One day, these same people would have to look at me as an equal. Despite all the effort, I still had a problem. I had no documents. Without a record, without an official name, I couldn't study at the school. That's when Mr. Cooper took me to the county courthouse. With the help of an old friend, he found a way to register me even without my family nearby. And finally, at 13 years old, I entered school for the first time. The desks were arranged in rows. The notebooks had clean sheets. The teachers talked about things I had never heard before. At first, I felt out of place. The other girls laughed among themselves, talked about their homes, about the toys they received at Christmas. I didn't know how to participate in that. But when the teacher handed me a book and asked me to read a passage aloud, my shame disappeared. I read without making mistakes, and for the first time I felt something new. Pride. But life always found a way to remind me that nothing would be easy. The bakery owner began to complain that I left early to study. "This isn't an orphanage. If you don't want to work properly, I'll find someone else." I was caught between fear and the desire to continue studying. If I lost the job, I would go hungry. But if I gave up school, I would never get out of that life. That's when I made a difficult decision. I left the bakery and started selling sweets at the market. I woke up before the sun rose, prepared homemade peanut brittle and apple pies in an old can that Mr. Cooper arranged for me. I sold until noon, earned a few coins, and then ran to school. It was a sacrifice, but it was the price of freedom. The years passed. I studied at night, worked during the day, and each day was a struggle to continue. Until one day, while buying a new pencil at the stationery store, a man asked, "Do you work or study?" Without thinking, I replied, "I'm a student." The word came out with a different weight. For the first time, I didn't call myself a servant or a street girl. I was a student, and that changed everything inside me. At the end of the year, I took the first important test of my life. It was an exam to get a merit scholarship at a better school. I spent nights without sleep, studied with borrowed books, wrote until my fingers went numb. And when the list of approved students came out, there was my name. I cried. I cried because after everything, after each slap, each humiliation, each night with hunger, I had finally achieved something for myself. The invisible girl who was once expelled with nothing was now forging her own path. And this was just the first of many battles. The fight wasn't over yet, but for the first time, I knew I would win. School was always my big chance. It was the only thing that separated me from the fate of so many girls like me. Girls who spent their lives cleaning, cooking, serving, and dying without ever having been owners of their own names. But getting there required more than willpower. It required sacrifice. I was no longer the invisible girl who slept at Mr. Cooper's store. Now I had a direction, but the world wouldn't give me anything for free. The scholarship I got covered my studies but not my life. To support myself, I continued selling sweets at the market and doing odd jobs where I could. I spent dawn studying, with notebooks open on the table of a small room I rented with the little I earned. Hunger still existed. Fatigue never went away. But every time I thought about giving up, I closed my eyes and remembered, you didn't come this far to stop now. In moments of doubt, I still returned to Mr. Cooper's store. He was aging quickly. Wrinkles marked his skin as if each one told a different story. "Are you tired, girl?" he asked me one day, seeing my sunken eyes and my hands trembling from so much writing. I wanted to lie, to say I was fine, but for the first time I broke down in front of him. "I don't know if I can do it. It seems like each day gets harder." He laughed with that calm way of someone who has seen the whole world turn. "Do you know what the hardest part of winning is?" I shook my head. "It's when you're so close to victory that you start to doubt if you deserve to get there." I lowered my eyes, absorbing those words. "But you know something, girl? What you have isn't luck. It isn't chance. It's struggle. And no one can take that away from you." That night, I studied like never before. My last school year arrived with a weight I had never felt before. I wasn't just finishing school. I was closing the cycle of a lifetime of suffering. The final exam was decisive. I spent weeks studying, memorizing formulas, reviewing texts, writing until my fingers hurt. On the day of the exam, my hands were sweating. The paper in front of me seemed enormous, full of words jumbled by nervousness. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes. I remembered the 8-year-old girl with dirty feet being dragged by her mother to a house where she would become a slave. I remembered the nights without dinner, the silent tears, the torn books, the first hidden notebook. And then I took the pencil and began to write. Days later, the results came out. I knew I needed to pass. There was no second chance. Either I conquered this victory, or I would return to a destiny that no longer belonged to me. When I arrived at school, the paper with the list of approved students was pasted on the wall. My heart was beating so hard I thought I would faint. I ran through the list with my eyes, feeling the letters jumble. Then there it was. My name. My legs faltered, and I needed to hold on to the wall not to fall. I had passed. After everything, after every fight, every cold night, every humiliation, I had passed. The girl who was once treated as nothing was now someone. And I cried. I cried without fear, without shame. I cried because for the first time I wasn't just a survivor. I was a winner. I ran to Mr. Cooper's store. I wanted to tell him, wanted him to see what he had helped build. But when I arrived, I felt something strange. The store was closed. My chest tightened. I looked around, looking for someone who knew what had happened. That's when a man, a vendor from the market, put his hand on my shoulder and said, "I'm sorry, girl. Mr. Cooper passed away last night." The ground disappeared from under my feet. I couldn't believe it. He had always been there, like an immutable part of my world. My chest filled with pain. I took a piece of paper from my pocket and, with trembling hands, wrote a last message for him. Folding it carefully, I slipped the sheet under the closed door of the store. There I wrote only, "I did it, thank you." After that, I walked away without looking back. On graduation day, I wore a simple dress that I bought with money from months of work. It wasn't luxurious, but it was mine. When they called my name to receive the diploma, I felt a lump in my throat. I walked to the stage slowly, remembering each step that brought me there. When I held the diploma in my hands, I closed my eyes for a second and thought about everything. I thought about the girl who slept hungry. I thought about the broken glass I cut with my hands. I thought about the first time I stole food. I thought about the slaps, the screams, the fear. I thought about the torn notebook. I thought about Mr. Cooper, who wasn't there to see me. And then I opened my eyes and smiled, because for the first time I knew I would never again be that invisible girl. Now I was the owner of my own life, and no one would ever take that away from me. When I finished school, the world finally seemed mine. I could choose where to go, what to do, but the freedom I had dreamed of so much brought an unexpected weight. I didn't know where to begin. The diploma was in my hands, but what would come next? I was still a poor girl, with no family nearby, no home of my own, no direction. That's when I remembered the promise I made to myself back then, when I wrote for the first time. I will get out of here. School was just the first step. Now I needed to take the second. And this step led me to an unexpected place, back to the town where it all began. I took the little money I had saved and boarded a Greyhound bus, bound for the mining town where I was born. The journey was long. The dirt roads were the same, the green fields passed by the window, as if time had never changed anything. But I knew I had changed. When I got off the bus and stepped again on the soil where my childhood was interrupted, I felt a shiver run through my body. It was strange to be there again. The houses were smaller than I remembered. The streets, once so immense to the child I was, now seemed narrow. Everything was the same, but I was no longer the same.
I want to pause for a moment. If you feel the love and are still listening to my story, please subscribe and hit the like button on the Grandparents Memories channel to show your support. Thank you so much.
My first impulse was to look for my mother. I asked about her at the small market, in the square, at the homes of acquaintances, until finally someone told me, "Your mother? Yes, she lives in that little house at the end of the street, but she's been a bit sick lately." My heart raced. I walked to the house with slow steps. With each meter traveled, I felt a knot in my chest. And then finally, I saw her. My mother was sitting in an old chair on the porch, her tired face, her eyes lost at some distant point. When I approached, she slowly raised her head. For a second, I thought she wouldn't recognize me. After all, so many years had passed. But then I saw her eyes water. "My daughter." Her voice came out weak, like a broken whisper. And at that instant, everything inside me crumbled. Without another word, I pivoted and departed. Seeking her remorse or acknowledgement of past transgressions wasn't my purpose. My presence there served my healing, not her absolution. In that pivotal moment, I recognized that my ultimate triumph wasn't found in harboring resentment. It resided in overcoming. Following that encounter, I journeyed back to the metropolitan area where I'd established my existence. I dedicated myself to further education, increased my professional commitment, and methodically achieved what once seemed beyond reach. I embraced education as my vocation. Indeed, I became an instructor, inspired by the individual who once revealed to me that knowledge offered my sole escape route. Now I would extend that same lifeline to youngsters who, similar to my early circumstances, entered life disadvantaged. With each pupil I guided toward literacy, expression, and aspiration, I sensed the mending of fragments from my fractured past. Now at 75, I recline in my cherished armchair, gazing outward through the window. Material wealth and lavish accommodations elude me. Yet I possess something far more significant: absolute certainty in my ownership of my personal narrative. Many contemporaries have faded into historical footnotes. Numerous girls who shared my forced labor didn't experience similar fortune. Yet here I remain. My recounting of these events isn't meant to perpetuate melancholy, but rather to convey to any listener that regardless of life's brutality, pathways from darkness invariably exist. Contemplating my experiences no longer evokes bitterness. Instead, I feel profound self-respect. I stand as tangible evidence that no individual is predestined to remain captive to circumstantial fate. We each possess the capacity to author our unique stories, and this constitutes mine. I would like to sincerely thank everyone for taking the time to listen to my story today. From my childhood struggles, the grueling days at Montgomery Manor, to finding light in the pages of books, my journey has taught me that inner strength and perseverance can help us overcome even the greatest challenges. I hope my story inspires you to believe that no matter where you start, no matter how insurmountable the obstacles may seem, you can always shape your own future. Knowledge is the key, and determination is the guiding flame. Thank you to the channel Grandparents Memories for giving me the opportunity to share and preserve these valuable lessons. If my story has touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it to spread this meaningful message to more people. I look forward to seeing you in the next stories. Thank you, and I wish everyone a day filled with joy and the strength to overcome all challenges.